All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're talking about one of the most incredible, most jaw-dropping urban transformations in history, the story of Shenzhen. So, I want you to picture this. Go back to 1979. Shenzhen is basically just a quiet little border town. We're talking about a collection of farming and fishing villages with a population you could easily fit inside a small sports stadium. Its economy was tiny, mostly just agriculture. And then you flash forward to today, and you get this. A glittering, sprawling, hyper-modern megacity. The population hasn't just grown, it has exploded to over 12 million people. It's now a global powerhouse for tech, for finance, for logistics. This wasn't just growth, this was a revolution.
Which brings us to the big question, the one that city planners and economists all over the world are still trying to unpack. How on earth do you do that? How do you build a world-class city from pretty much scratch in a single generation? What's the secret sauce?
Well, the whole story really kicks off with a totally radical idea. See, at the time, China's economy was centrally planned. It was mostly closed off from the rest of the world. And then they decided to try a bold experiment. And the core of that experiment was something called a special economic zone, or an SEZ. The easiest way to think about it is like a bubble, a special area inside the country where the normal economic rules didn't apply. The plan was to let market forces and foreign money be the engine for growth, which was a completely revolutionary concept for China back then. And things moved at a dizzying speed. It all started in '79 with a small area called the Shekou Industrial Zone. They literally called it the test tube of reform. Just a year later, the entire Shenzhen SEZ was official. And before the decade was out, Shenzhen was already doing things unheard of in China, like privatizing state companies and even launching the country's first ever stock exchange. It really was a city built on being first. Okay, so let's put some hard numbers on this incredible transformation. Remember that starting GDP back in 1979? It was less than 200 million yuan. By 2017, that number rocketed to over 2.2 trillion yuan. I mean, that's not just growth. That's an economic supernova. The SEZ model wasn't just working, it was one of the most powerful economic engines ever created. But here's the thing about being the world's factory floor. It has a ceiling. So Shenzhen faced its next massive challenge: how to move beyond just making stuff cheaply and become a place that actually creates and innovates. And this was the city's great pivot. It was a fundamental shift, moving away from that old model of just assembling things using cheap land and labor to a whole new model based on research and development, creating patented products, and diving into high-tech industries. And they didn't just talk about it. They poured unbelievable amounts of money into it. Get this, Shenzhen invests more than 5% of its entire GDP back into R&D. To give you some perspective, that's nearly double the rate of the United States and way more than double the entire European Union. It's an incredibly deliberate strategy. All that investment created this really unique, dense ecosystem for innovation. You've got the world-famous Huaqiangbei electronics market, a place where you can find parts for literally anything and build a new prototype in just days. And at the same time, you have these homegrown global giants like Huawei and Tencent leading the charge. But this nonstop, relentless drive for growth started to create new tensions. As the city leadership started to roll out big projects to improve the quality of life, like adding green spaces, not everyone was on board. This quote from a resident kind of captures that skepticism that started to bubble up. This feeling that maybe some of these big, top-down plans weren't actually worth the cost. And that leads us to Shenzhen's third major transformation. All that explosive growth for decades came at a huge environmental price. So the city had to pivot again, this time towards becoming green and sustainable. The city's own leaders were surprisingly blunt about the crisis they were facing. They laid out what they called the 4 non-sustainability problems. Basically, they admitted they were running out of land, running out of water and energy, and that the environment was just stretched to its absolute limit. The very model that made them successful was now threatening their future. So what did they do? They went big, really big. Take transport, for example. They rolled out over 120,000 new energy vehicles. Today, Every single public bus in that massive city is electric. It's created these strangely quiet city streets and has tackled air pollution head-on. And this green thinking goes way beyond just cars and buses. Look at the port of Shenzhen, one of the busiest shipping ports on the planet. It now has 100% shore power. That means container ships can plug directly into the electrical grid instead of burning dirty diesel fuel while docked, which cuts a ton of emissions. And it turns out the public is actually behind this green push. But the reasons why are really interesting. When you ask residents why they're willing to pay more for green facilities, the #1 reason is just to improve their own living conditions. Close behind is the benefit to the environment, but some are also just pragmatic, hoping it will increase their housing prices. It's this mix of personal gain and public good. And to manage all this complexity, Shenzhen is building something that sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie, a digital twin. It's a complete, living, virtual model of the entire city, constantly fed with real-time data from sensors everywhere. This lets them do incredible things, like simulate traffic flows or predict floods, making the city smarter and safer. But all of this, the economic boom, the tech, the green pivot, it all leads to what might be Shenzhen's biggest and most difficult challenge yet. A question about the very soul of the city. Who is all of this for? I mean, this is the image of Shenzhen that gets broadcast to the world, right? A clean, green, orderly, and beautiful model city, a vision of the future. But this postcard view, well, it doesn't tell the full story. Because hidden in the shadows of those gleaming skyscrapers, you have what are called urban villages. These are these incredibly dense neighborhoods that are home to millions of the migrant workers, the very people who literally built the city. And as this UN report points out, these places are often seen by the state as chaotic and in need of control, creating this huge divide in the city. And the intense pressure isn't just felt by the workers. Even at the very top, among the city's successful tech founders and entrepreneurs, there's this feeling of what one researcher calls precarious privilege. It's this idea that you're under constant, crushing pressure to succeed. Excellence isn't just an option. It's seen as a mandatory part of who you are. So here's the bottom line. Shenzhen has, without a doubt, written a completely new playbook for how to build a megacity at lightning speed. It's proven it can be economically explosive, a hub of innovation, and a leader in green tech. But its biggest test is happening right now. Can it build a city that is not just smart and successful, but one that is also fair and equitable for everyone who calls it home? That's the chapter of Shenzhen's story that is still being written.